Welcome to the Brown CS IPP Alumni Interview Series. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Charisa Shin, a distinguished alumnus of Brown University. Charissa, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this interview.
To start, could you give us a little introduction about yourself?
Yeah. So I graduated from Brown undergrad in 2022 May, and while I was at Brown, I did an independent concentration in something called human-centered design, which was essentially kind of a mixture of CS classes along with cognitive science, certain like interaction design related classes, and then sociology. And then, so I currently work as a product designer too at Microsoft. And specifically, I work on Copilot, which is kind of like Microsoft's AI tool for a platform called Viva Engage. And yeah, so my work is mostly like in thinking about how we can use AI to increase productivity and efficiency in like everyday tasks, especially in communication with other people across organizations. And yeah, I think my time at Brown really helped prepare me for the role that I'm in now. And I guess I'll talk more about that later. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit of an overview of me.
Thank you, Charissa. For current Brown students thinking about courses, do you have any recommendations of the best classes that you feel help the most in your current role?
So during my time at Brown, I think the great part about Brown is that obviously there's so many different classes you can take, and I think there's less of a barrier to entry than some other universities. But I think with that also it's kind of a double-edged sword because, there's a lot of indecision, there's so much you can take, you kind of want to fill your schedule as well as you can. So I definitely suffered from that a little bit. I think I took a lot of classes, especially in the beginning, like freshman, sophomore year, that had nothing to do with what I'm doing now, which isn't to say it's not the worst thing in the world because I think there were probably some skills and things I took away from those classes that I maybe subconsciously use today. But actually, when I came into Brown, I was thinking about double concentrating in computer science and visual arts, and ended up not doing that just because I didn't. I think I learned that I wanted to go into design, and taking back end related CS classes just like wasn't really helpful for me in the long run. And also visual arts, I felt like the department was a little bit more abstract than I wanted. Um, but I think eventually over the course of time, and once I declared my IC, I kind of tailored my classes so that they were a little bit more kind of as I described at the very beginning, like cognitive science oriented, a little more interaction design heavy. Specific classes I feel like were really helpful for my design journey were I'm taking a look at a list I haven't looked at in a really long time. Um, well, CS 1300 was really useful, UI UX with Jeff Huang, just because that was kind of my first introduction, I think, to some of the UX principles that you don't really hear about in like other CS classes. And there was actually Professor Huang also taught like a grad level seminar on human computer interaction. I think that was CS 2300. And that was like a little bit more of a deeper dive into, I guess, more of the technical aspects of HCI, which I really appreciated. And even now as a designer, I think I look back at some of those, yeah, just some of the learnings from there, and I find them really helpful. So those two are really helpful. I also took something kind of related, kind of not, maybe not like at first glance, but I think it was PHP 1680, which is pathology to power. And that was kind of, it's a public health class that talks about accessibility and just different people's abilities and how to define disability. And I think that was really important in my work, like leading to my work today, because I deal a lot with how do we make designs, like digital designs, accessible to anyone, regardless of, yeah, just like what their relationship is with the built environment. So that was super useful. I also took Intro to Social Forces, which is Soc, I think 10, which is kind of like a big, like overarching overview of sociology. That was really helpful too, I think, just to get a big picture of like people, organizations, their interactions. And I think maybe sociology is not something you traditionally connect to like product or UX design, but I think at the heart of UX design, there's kind of like a study of people and their interactions with technology. And like, the technology is one side, but the people is also a really important side too. So the study of yeah, those relationships I think are really important. And then lastly, I took CLIPS 1560, which was visually guided action and cognitive processes within the CLIPS department with Professor Song. And that was interesting and useful because it kind of talks about from like the cognitive science perspective how like sight and like those kinds of interactions I think affect yeah just I guess how sight and like visual cognitive processes affect interactions with different kinds of environments. So yeah, that's again, the classes are kind of all over the place, but these are the ones that stuck out to me. And even if they're not like traditional design classes, like I think I still apply a lot of what I learned in my work today.
Thank you, Carissa. Can you also share a bit about your journey from your time at Brown to your current position? What were some key milestones or experiences that led you here?
So my my design journey was kind of rocky, just because like I see definitely like an escalation in students' interests in UX design over the years, which is great. But when I was first starting out, even though it wasn't even that long ago, I feel like there were just not as many resources and not as much interest in the field, or maybe I was just getting started. So like there was not much of a design community at Brown at all, and I think um, as you can see, like from my last answers, there were not a lot of design related classes either. So my time at Brown was kind of stitching together and making my own design pathway. And that also kind of carried over into like finding internships and recruiting as well. So and also like half of my college experience was during COVID. So I was at home for part of it. And I was I actually have never done an interview in person before. Like that's how much COVID has affected my journey. Like I've only done design interviews online. Um, but I think because of that flexibility at the same time, like I was able to do a lot of different kinds of internships during college. A lot of them they were kind of all over the place. I worked at a startup. I went through like Y Combinator with a few friends and worked on design for yeah, like a very, very, very fledgling startup. I also worked for a design agency. So I worked with Nike through this agency and did stuff for like their Apple Watch experience while I was in college. And this was actually, I think I did that internship actually while I was take well, during the semester, which I don't know if I would necessarily recommend, but and then my junior year summer, I interned at Microsoft at the same team that I work at today. And then I ended up joining full time after that. And in the middle of this, also, I worked as kind of like a freelance UX designer as well. So worked with kind of like a freelance, almost like a consultancy company, and worked with a few startups that way. So have experience with working at both like the big corporate level as well as more of the startup kind of level. And a lot of these internships I got through cold emailing recruiters and companies, just because, as I mentioned before, like not too many resources floating around, I think, especially for design recruiting. So it took a lot of just individually reaching out and researching different companies and agencies kind of on my own.
Thank you, Carissa. I think a lot of students hearing that who are like currently very confused about what to do will, be very happy to learn that, similar things happened, even for someone who's so successful in their UI UX role right now. Um, leading to that, can you describe what your day-to-day work looks like in your current role and how collaborative is your work environment?
Yeah. So to start off with a collaboration, my role is very collaborative. Like, I don't know if you heard the Teams ping in the background, but
Yeah.
I'm always getting messages. But I kind of work, I really like maybe my favorite part of my role is that it is very collaborative and it's kind of at the center of like communication between engineers, PMs, research, data science, copywriters slash like content designers and other designers. So I work with like a lot of different kinds of people in a lot of different roles. And I think it's really cool kind of being like the touch point of designs like becoming real through the engineer's work. And then I think I'm also in this role given a lot of responsibility on the strategy side, so working with like product managers and figuring out how this feature like specifically fits within the company as a whole, and then kind of like figuring out what roadmaps and timelines look like as well. So it is very very collaborative, and because of that, that means my day to day is a lot of meetings because I'm constantly talking to people, like messaging or meetings. I would say probably maybe like half of my role is that, and then half of my role is actually spent like on Figma doing the designs themselves. Um, but like kind of at a glance, maybe I'll have like a stand up with the engineers and the PMs just to kind of talk about what I'm working on currently. I'll usually have some kind of presentation during the week to update like our leadership team on design updates. And then there's kind of like different office hours sprinkled throughout the week. So either I'll go to like a copywriting office hour. So our copywriters will like help me kind of finalize the copy in the designs, or I'll go to like accessibility office hours, which is where we work with like accessibility experts on figuring out if like our designs can be read properly by screen readers, and things like that. And then there's like miscellaneous check-ins with my manager in between, and things like that. Yeah, so a lot of talking, a lot of collaboration for sure.
Thank you, Carissa. Um, I think you touched upon this like a little bit previously, but how did you think your internships like shaped your career and like how did your past internship experience kind of prepare you for your current job in the industry?
I think because I worked at startups in the past, I got a little bit of a taste of like what designing quickly could feel like. And my team now is very fast paced. So I think that helped prepare me a little bit just to be ready to constantly be iterating on your designs. And the thing about, I think, if you're working on something that moves really quickly, is that you can't get attached to your designs necessarily. Like you should be able to, I think, properly justify your design decisions and be able to back them up. But you also have to be ready to lose them. So you can't be kind of, yeah, like overly emotionally attached to your designs because they could change depending on feedback, depending on like engineering feasibility, just a lot of different factors that affect it. So I think maybe starting at this startup level was helpful for me because yeah, I got a taste of that. I think I think when I worked for a design agencies are kind of like a middleman, so you're working with like bigger companies through this agency. Um, I think that helped me context switch pretty quickly because I would work with like a couple of different kinds of companies that were very different from each other and kind of move back and forth between them. And I think in design, sometimes you are required to context switch just because of like changing projects, sometimes because of like priorities changing, things like that. So I think those were skills that I picked up from previous internships. But then when I worked at Microsoft for my junior year internship, I think that was the first time that I touched like a really big design system, just because the company was so big. And that was like a whole new experience because they like no longer it was no longer like me building that, but something that already existed that I had to leverage. So learning how to do that was kind of a trip, but that I think that also kind of helped lay some groundwork for like what I do today.
And finally, what do you like about your current role as product designer, and what motivated you to choose this career path?
So yeah, I just said before, I really like the collaboration. I think some roles like you feel like you're working very individually, but this one feels like I'm always working with people. And it's great just to have conversations, I think, with people who are outside of the field, just to get a look on like what they're working on, how your work affects theirs, and vice versa. Which is, I think, something you don't really get to experience too much in undergrad, just because I don't know, you have a very like narrow view of your assignment alone. So it's very collaborative in spirit. And then I think like when I first started out, I was bouncing around careers, or career ideas and like what I wanted to be when I was in undergrad. So, like I wanted to be a SWE at one point. I wanted to be an animator at one point. I think I was like pre-med for like 2 months before I decided pre-med is not the way to go. um, but I think what drew me ultimately design was like the study of people and people and users being the heart of design. Because I didn't want to do something that felt very detached from like people. And I think I also wanted to keep kind of like an artistic side in my work. Just not saying that like other fields are not creative, but I think design and like the visual output was really encouraging to me, just to be able to like have that immediate gratification. Um, and so that's, and I think I also like, I appreciate the use of patterns in designs and like figuring out which patterns to use and also how to break patterns and what that looks like and like how you can justify that. So there's also like a big problem solving aspect in design as well, I think. So it's not only visual creativity, but there is a lot of like technical thinking and problem solving as well. I think that people don't realize a lot of times. But yeah, those that's kind of ultimately why I chose to be a product designer in the end.
Okay, thank you, Carissa.